This is 5 Live Sport.
Tuffers and Vaughan's Cricket Show.
Well, it's all bio-bubbles and isolation stations for cricketers at the moment. Tuffers, how would you have coped with 2 weeks staring at the same four walls?
Oh, I don't know. It could have been tricky. I'm sure room service might have got a bit of a pounding, but my nickname was the cat, wasn't it? So I would have probably just curled up in the corner and had a little snooze.
Well, we'll be hearing from David Milan on how he's passing the time quarantining for a fortnight in an Australian hotel room. And no Vaughanie, but we do have Sir Alistair Cook tonight. Cookie, great to have you with us. What a 12 months Joe Root and Owen Morgan have to plan for now. What a year it's going to be.
Hi Ellie, hi Tuffers. Big shoes to fill, old Vaughanie, but thanks for having me. Yeah, wow. Amazing opportunity to play, isn't it? 2020 World Cup, Ashes away, India away, possible World Test Championship final, so much cricket, and of course all the other series thrown in there.
Yeah, we're going to try and talk about how they will squeeze it all in. We'll also talk about the start of the Big Bash and what is the latest body part in cricket to get sponsored. Cookie looks mystified and slightly worried.
This is a beauty.
All guesses welcome, but try and keep it clean. Do get in touch with us tonight at 5 Live Sport or text us on 85058.
Tuffers and Vaughan's Cricket Show
On 5 Live.
So, Tuffers, last week we were on the eve of the ODI series between South Africa and England. We were speculating about who Owen Morgan might have in his team, but the games never happened. It just meant, of course, with positive COVID tests, first of all on the South African side, then among hotel staff, then some tests among the England party, which proved to be negative, but it punctured the bio bubble, I think, more or less. And it meant the series was cancelled. The England team on their way back home right now. A statement said the tour was called off to ensure the mental and physical health and welfare of the players. So, right call, Tuffers, do you think?
Well, I'm sure it wasn't taken lightly. This England set-up, that they leave no stone unturned, do they? So I'm sure they had a good chat about it, and that's with the coaching staff and also the players. But there was obviously some form of anxiety around the group, around the way things were sort of happening over in South Africa. Otherwise, you just wouldn't have just said, right, that's it, we're clearing off. So I don't quite know, the ins and outs of it, but one thing's for sure, that I'm sure that they wouldn't have done it without sort of due care and attention, so to speak. And of course, at the end of the day, it's all about health and mental health as well of the players. So they made that decision and they've stood by it. So fair play to them.
Yeah, I mean, Alistair, you and I spoke on the breakfast programme, didn't we, on Sunday morning, just as the news was breaking. And you said at the time, right, the tour's off at this point, effectively, in your opinion, and you were proved right.
Yeah, well, I think as soon as they start talking about whether we should go home or not, every bit of attention is away from the cricket and you're not in a good space. I think it had to be the right call with, Christmas coming up and your family thinking, we could get stuck here, at Christmas in South Africa on your own. You're talking about mental health. That's not good for anyone with the amount of cricket coming up. And it's a really tough situation because I think the South African board, obviously, from what I've kind of read and spoken to a few of the guys, they've obviously tried to be a bit more relaxed, weren't they? Allowed out to go and play a bit of golf and all that kind of stuff, just trying to make it a bit more relaxed rather than the bubbles we had in the summer. But obviously when you make it a bit more relaxed, better for the player welfare and their mental state, that obviously increases the risks and, and that's kind of been proven right. And, I think all what's been happening, look at the rugby, the Fijian rugby side, there was 3 cases one day and then suddenly 28 the next week. I think, I think once you're in the bubble and a couple of things happen, a couple of positive tests, then there's no way of controlling it. So I think it was the right decision just to pull the plug, unfortunately, for South African cricket.
Cookie, what would have been the process around that? I mean, you've been captain and what have you. Would the captain been right involved at the heart of all of those discussions?
Yeah, it would have been the captain is, but I think what they would have done would have been a lot of small meetings with the coach, probably obviously the medical team. I don't know which doctor would have been on tour, but him, and then obviously Ashley Giles, probably Tom Harrison. It would have started off with those 4, and then kind of the coach and the captain would have then fed back to the players, probably the senior players, and then everyone. It'd be quite regimented. I actually feel for Owen Morgan because they're like lead. You love being the captain of England. It's such a great thing, but you spend a lot of time on stuff which is not relevant to playing a game of cricket. It's all other stuff which you have to get right because it's so important.
As it turned out, as we said, the tests, the two members of the party that tested positive initially, then tested negative, and I think that came through on that. We knew about that on Tuesday. So could they have not waited for those test results to come through to confirm the tests, and then said, right, okay, well, we can play on Wednesday, even if it was just one game before they flew back on Thursday, because with flights being booked on Thursday, they couldn't really change that very much. But could they not have said, right, we will see what the results are, just to try and understand that this is a difficult situation, that Cricket South Africa stood to lose a lot of money for this?
Well, they could have done, but I think what they'd have been tested almost every day. What happens if they say we're going to play? I think the players would have just said, well, we could play. We'll go and play the next game, but then another positive test comes back. Do you know what I mean? Like, no one knows, do they? It's so uncertain. And as soon as all that creeps in, suddenly the cricket isn't that important. And I don't think, it's the players' mind will be on totally everything else but trying to face the South African bowlers, trying to hit the ball out the park. And it's just not a great situation to be in. The minds will be distracted. They'll be thinking, let's get on that plane home. Let's get out of this, because there's no, I don't see any upside to play one game, unfortunately, for the players. I understand the money in the South African board and hopefully something can be done about that. But I'm sure the next series they go, the bubble will be a lot tighter.
Well, let's hear a little bit from that South African perspective after the tour was called off. Our correspondent Jonathan Agnew had a chat to Cricinfo South Africa's Ferdows Munda.
I just think a lot could have been done differently and better. The 3 T20s happened, but even then there were positive cases in the South African camp. And I think there's just a lot of concern as to how well South Africa can host a bio bubble, given a real myriad of things, including that we're not a country that can afford to test professional sports people an unlimited number of times, because we've got healthcare workers that need to be tested. We've got scant resources. There's a cost factor. Yeah, lots to think about.
Yeah. What do you do if you're the board, though? You're Cricket South Africa. You've got no money. You've got that sort of open window maybe of England coming and saving us millions of dollars and so on. Right. The temptation to play these games must have been huge from the board's perspective.
Definitely, but there's a huge financial incentive to play these games. So South Africa were hoping to host India for 3 T20s sometime in August, which was never going to happen because that was really when the virus peaked here. And those then were taken out of the budget, and that would have been a huge amount of money. And Cricket South Africa is facing massive losses in this 4-year cycle, 2019 to 2022. So really their only hopes of making some money were a successful tour of England, and then hopefully if Australia tour, although even that is looking quite unlikely at this stage, given Australia and how they've handled the pandemic. So hosting England was going to make around $4 million, and the cancellation of the ODIs will result in around $2 million not being made. And so even though they've sort of said they've postponed and it may yet take place in the 4-year cycle, if you look at the fixture list and you look at what's coming up for both teams, it's very difficult to see how you will fit 3 ODIs in. There's 2 things here. The one is financially, Cricket South Africa are in trouble, and they've also spent a lot of money trying to make this happen, testing lots of people, paying for all those tests, creating a bio bubble. And then the other is that it's possibly dented the confidence for teams who may want to come and tour here or are scheduled to come and tour here, where they're looking at this and saying, we don't know if we feel comfortable going to South Africa anymore. And I think it's going to result in quite a conundrum of things happening, and maybe we just need less international cricket until a vaccine is rolled out.
From a journalistic perspective, for those, do people feel there that, as people do here a bit, that sport has sold out to TV, and the pressure to fulfil broadcasting deals is massive these days?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely being highlighted more and more, and that the only reason that there was such a push to have these matches take place in the end, beyond like World Cup Super League points or anything, was just the fact that Cricket South Africa need money. And it also kind of shows you the precarious nature of the broadcast deal, because South Africa only really make money when they're hosting one of England, India or Australia. And even then, they'll only make a decent amount of money if the result of those series is uncertain. And so there's, the broadcaster can hedge their bets on it being something exciting to watch. When they host Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc., they're not making money. They're spending money because they're putting teams up, and now, they're putting them up in bubble environments. So it really means that the way for smaller nations who are not part of that big three to make money off cricket is multi-team tournaments, or having one of the big three come and tour. And, that means then that everybody wants the Indias, the Australias and the Englands, which puts pressure on them to play much more than maybe they would like to, and which puts pressure on the hosts to make sure that they can provide an environment that is safe. So I think, it's really showing us that I think cricket and the way it runs needs a bit of a rethink. International cricket and the way it makes money also needs a bit of a rethink.
Well, that was Fudus Munda of Cricket Info South Africa talking to our cricket correspondent, Jonathan Agnew. I mean, Alistair, this puts this into stark perspective, doesn't it, really? That, you've got your three rich nations, you've got England, Australia, India, and then you've got everybody else. And when you're expecting the expense of the testing, of the bubble, I mean, we know the ECB spent an absolute fortune on staging those games. And it's really hard for the less well-off nations to do this. And then when they stand to lose $2 million because those games didn't go ahead, it's just, it makes your eyes water.
Well, it's incredibly tough, but the one thing's for certain, the three big nations, as she called it, is we need every other nation as well. There's no point just being India, Australia and England playing cricket. We need South Africa, we need West Indies, we need New Zealand. So the way she said, international cricket needs to have a look at itself, how the funding, I think that's absolutely right. And I think the last 12 months would have made every board aware of that. And I think it wouldn't surprise me if there are changes. There has to be changes. We can't let South African cricket go under. And if it means, we fit these 3 one-day games in, then we have to fit these one game. If it makes that back that $2 million, but the way that the pot has to be split must be split probably a bit more evenly, because we need this game to thrive, not just in 3 countries, but in every country it plays in, if not more.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I mean, you've still got to. I think it's a bit of a cop out saying that, we haven't got the money to then put it on, and that's why our bubbles, so to speak, burst. You know what I mean? You have got to get that in place, especially in the times we're living in at the moment. Hopefully that all gets better and what have you. But you can't sort of blame the lack of funding for not being able to test, not being able to have security, not being able to have things in place that you can guarantee the team's safety. It's as simple as that. We understand that there's huge costs involved and what have you, and I agree with Cookie there that perhaps the pot should be, especially at this time, sort of like divvied out a little bit more even, if only it is to make sure that cricket can go on safely. It's as simple as that. That is not in question for me. You can't say, I'm a bit skint, that's why we couldn't do the testing properly.
No, and I don't think the ECB, say at Southampton or at Old Trafford, probably spent that much more money. It's just that they were so strict, weren't they? We joked about it. How many times we joke about it on air? They were so strict. Like we didn't see a player, did we? We nowhere near saw a player. We just sat in the media bubble. There was probably about 15 of us, with the Sky boys and the radio boys who had their dining room. Everyone else was in a different dining room. I'm just hearing coming out of South Africa that England shared the dining room with the same people serving, both sets of players. Yes, at different times, but you can just see that it's just more chance. Unfortunately, I know it's really sad, but more chance of that virus spreading, if that was the way it is. You can deep clean you want, but I think everyone had to look at the way the ECB did it this summer, and unfortunately it has to be as strict as this until the vaccine comes. If we want to guarantee, you can't guarantee it, but do as good as you can to try and get this cricket on, because it is so important.
Yeah, and I think that everyone does then have to come together. Sorry, and I think everyone does have to come together in these times, and that's the people with the more money, or the cricket boards with more money. Everyone's got to kind of put that aside for the time being, and just make sure that there's a product out there and everyone's safe. Because as Cookie said, it's all very well and good being England, Australia. That doesn't last for long if no one else is knocking about to have a game of cricket against.
Yeah, and we had exactly this conversation with Jason Holder last week, Tuffers, didn't we? Where he was saying that that it was great, the gratitude that the West Indies had for coming over, playing the test matches that they played. But actually, you've got to put your money where your mouth is to a certain extent. If you're one of the big nations, the big big 3 nations.
Yes, exactly, and especially at this time, with COVID and what have you, it's got to be a coming together. Cricket has got to become a one kind of dimensional game, hasn't it? Everyone's got to be under that cricket umbrella just to make sure everything's fine. Listen, couple of years' time, when everyone's back to normal and what have you, I still think there's a conversation to be had about should the pot be split more evenly. But I think especially at the moment, you know, as you say, thanks very much, West Indies, but, you know, what are we actually going to do to help them? They've helped us. They need a bit of help as well.
Well, look, one man who did pretty well out of the games that were played in South Africa was England's David Malan. He is the number one T20 batsman in the world following that series, the most ranking points ever scored. He is currently isolated, though, in Perth for 2 weeks in a hotel before he joins up with the Hobart Hurricanes in the Big Bash League. And Tuffers and I had a bit of a chat to him earlier from his hotel room.
Hello, mate. How are you? How's it going?
Good, thanks, Tuffers. Day 5 of quarantine, so as good as can be at the moment.
Yeah, what's the hotel like?
A bit outdated, actually. It's it's not what I thought it was going to be like when I looked at the pictures. I think we've got the old school wing of the hotel, probably saving a bit of cash, the Aussie government, but it does a job. That's all that matters, really.
Yeah, it's looking like it could just do with a lick of paint from your Zoom call.
It could, and a new carpet as well. But
oh dear.
we won't go into detail.
Yeah, have you got a window that opens?
Haven't got a balcony. I've got a disabled toilet as well, so that's a bit. I can do a number 2 in a shower at the same time. So it's really exciting. Actually.
That's the kind of detail we want from you, David. Thank you very much indeed
honestly.
for that.
Just be positive. That's all that matters. Just be positive.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, look, I mean, we want to talk about your experience in South Africa from a personal point of view, from a batting point of view. It was absolutely extraordinary. But I mean, how was it for you in South Africa, generally speaking, bio-bubble wise?
Yeah, it was slightly easier than the bubble that we had in England in the summer. We were allowed to sit outside and have dinner. You were allowed at the pool certain times of the day, and you were allowed to get in the gym as well, which is all sort of on site, which was really nice. It didn't seem as regimented as it did in England, and I think it helped being away from the ground as well. Really struggled in England with the sense that you open your windows and you're staring at the pitch. You had a balcony and what have you, but it was all cricket. Even when you had dinner, you were looking at the cricket pitch. So it was quite a nice change to have a bubble away from the ground. And the boys actually really did enjoy it from that side. Didn't actually feel like you were too much in a bubble because you're away from the ground.
But there has to be a balance struck, isn't there, really? And it feels like, obviously latterly in the last few weeks or the last few days, there was a sense that relaxation was too great. And this created these concerns about the security of the bubble. Was that something that you saw when you were there?
No, definitely not. We had all the rules, wearing masks inside, social distancing. So we had all the same sort of rules in place as we had in the UK. We were just able to be outside slightly more. I wasn't there when this all kicked off. I've sort of read on the press and picked up a bit on groups here and there. So it seemed like it all happened really quickly. So it is tough when things like that happen. Players want to feel safe. Players want to feel like their interests are at heart, especially with this pandemic going on. From the ECB side, they did everything from their power. What happened, I can't comment because, as I said, I wasn't involved there. So, or that when it kicked off, I wasn't around to answer that. So,
but there obviously was a bit of anxiety amongst the group.
Yeah, there must have been. I don't think any decision to call off a tour will come lightly. If something like that happens, there obviously must have been some big concerns amongst the players and the medical staff, coaching staff. As people have been saying, the players' well-being has probably been the most important thing, especially with all the bubbles that they've been in. Some of the guys have come from the IPL where they've been in really strict quarantine / bubbles, if you want to put it that way. Then to go to this and then this happen, you can sort of understand if some players sort of felt a bit uncomfortable and a bit uneasy. It's not an easy time for anyone in the world at the moment, but to be stuck in an environment like that where you can't leave and suddenly inside the bubble there's suddenly a little bit of a virus as such, it probably puts guys on edge a little bit.
Yeah, and were the England boys able to sort of voice their concerns?
Yeah, they were. From what I've been sort of reading, there were a couple of team meetings when everything happened. Obviously I wasn't part of those meetings. I was sat out here in day 2 or whatever it was in quarantine. So to see that everything was done, their opinions were taken. They were asked what they felt. And obviously whoever made the decision was probably based that on what the players are feeling as well.
It's interesting, isn't it? I've seen a couple of articles in the last couple of days, one by Nasser Hussain, one by Michael Atherton, saying that they felt that the tour was called off too quickly, that they pulled the plug too easily. But do you think that it's an indication in some ways of how we've moved on, the respect of the players' mental health, that if they were putting up red flags, then the England management have listened to that? Yeah,
definitely. It only takes 2 or 3 or 4 of the players to have concerns, and that sort of rubs on the rest of the group. I think mental health is a massive thing. People are really aware of that now. And as I said, with some of the players that have been in bubbles for the last 3-4 months, they came from bubbles to the IPL. Sort of 4 or 5 week bubbles to the IPL, and then probably had maybe a week at home before flying out again. You can see why some guys would probably be a bit anxious about that.
Well, look, let's just go back to your hotel room, David, because you painted us a lovely picture of your bathroom already.
It's a lovely blue.
we can see you on Zoom. So how big is your room? Can you kind of just show us around on your camera, or is it? Are you looking around to see if your bed's made and you've tied it up, haven't you?
It won't take long.
I tidied this part of the room. The rest of it's quite messy, but I can give you a quick spin. It's actually it's not too bad. I've actually left the treadmill. I made the bed specially for this as well, as you can see. Really well done, great job. But yeah, that's sort of the room. Got a lot of the gym equipment in the corner here. Cricket Australia have been fantastic in giving me the equipment. I've got a treadmill outside the room that is too heavy for me to move in. And with the new rules and regulation from the Western Australian government, no one's allowed to help me get them in, so that's just stuck outside at the moment. So they're actually sending me a treadmill tomorrow for me to construct myself or build myself. So I don't know how that's going to go, but we'll give that a good crack.
Good luck with that. Good luck. A flat pack treadmill.
I can't even do an IKEA bed. No, I'm not good. An IKEA bed collapses if I do. You know what? I moved into a new place recently, and it took me about a month to build a set of drawers, because every time I built them, it collapsed, and I had to start from the scratch again. So I don't know what I'm going to do with this treadmill, but I'll give it a good crack. If Salty and Alex Hales could do it, I probably can get past that.
How are you filling your days, mate? I mean, do you try to have some sort of schedule?
Yeah, it's to be fair, the frustrating thing is actually the call reception is they knock on your door at 7 a.m. and shout breakfast, and they leave it outside your door. So they wake me up at 7 o'clock every morning, which is a bit disappointing when you're trying to have a lie-in. But yeah, I try to get up. I do a Zoom sort of fitness session for an hour. Then I've got the bike in the background, so I sit on the bike for an hour, and then I've still got my program that I need to get through. So, I tend to get through about 2.5 hours worth of training just to sort of kill the day, wait for lunch, wait for dinner. It's just filling the days and trying to get some sort of routine. I'm very routine-based, so if I can get something going, I actually feel like the days go pretty quickly. Actually, I read an article that Kagiso Rabada wrote where he said, they feel like luxury prisons, and that's sort of a little bit what it feels like here. It feels like you're in sort of a prison. You get your 3 meals a day. If there's questions to be asked, when your food's delivered, you're not allowed to speak to the people that deliver your food. You have to pick the phone up, and you're like, you're 20 meters away. I've just tested negative twice in the last 8 days to the virus, but if that's what it needs to do to be able to keep the population of Australia safe, then that's the way it has to be.
Yeah, a lot of us have been very jealous of listening to all the crowds in Australia. How much of a pull was that for you to go over and just get to play in front of huge crowds again?
You know what, Tuffers? It's actually been quite nice not to play in front of crowds. So when you make a mistake, you don't get told how rubbish you are all the time. But yeah, look, watching it on here, it is exciting actually. To watch them go out and the crowd go mad. I think the legs are going to shake again if I walk out and bat in front of it, just to get used to it. The pressure will be on again. But look, it's what we want to do. We want to be playing in front of crowds, and it's fantastic to see that the rules and regulations, as strict as they have been here, have been able to allow crowds back to sport, because that's what we want to get back to as soon as possible.
Just before we move on from the whole mental health business and the fact that you're having to quarantine and being locked down, I thought Ashley Giles's approach to all of this was interesting, that he said that anybody who's been in South Africa, so presumably yourself included, would have mental health screenings. I mean, you've been in the game a long time. How do you reflect on the way the attitude has changed to care of players' mental health?
I think it's been really good, actually. It's especially when I started, you just think, I'm tired, I'm not playing well. There was no real awareness when you were actually felt really burnt out and you felt mentally drained, and the pressure that comes with playing international sport, county cricket, the scrutiny that you're under now from social media, commentators. Everyone seems to have an opinion these days, and eventually it does get to you. And I think when probably even probably 4 or 5 years ago, people didn't really realise how much of an impact it really did. You look at guys like Marcus Trescothick, who's one of the best players you've ever seen, how badly that affected him. And I think the awareness around it now is absolutely fantastic. And to see someone like, or hear someone like Ashley Giles come out and say something like that for the players, I think is massive. Just considering the fact that he's your boss, and if he's able to understand that as well as he does, it means the players have a safe place and someone to speak to if they do feel like they're in that situation, that they need to speak to someone without being judged about it. So I think it's a fantastic approach the ECB have had towards this.
You are the number 1 rated T20 batsman in the world. As you sit in your lonely hotel room in Perth, the highest ever points as well. This time 3 years ago, we were out in Australia watching you play in the Ashes, which seems like a lifetime ago. But at that stage, you'd only played 1 T20 international. So how have you changed, and what has changed for you?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, just getting an opportunity is the first thing. I was lucky enough to get that opportunity 3 years ago where, and I did well. And then to have kept my name in and around the hat by doing well in tournaments and playing well in county cricket, I think that's the key, is just to be part of this squad. And then this last sort of 12 months, I think it's either 13 or 14 out of the last 16 or 17 games. It just helps so much, when you're not thinking about coming in and out all the time. Are you going to play on this tour? You're not going to play on that tour. It takes away a lot of the negative thoughts that you have. I'd say, the journey's been quite hard. A lot of disappointments of rocking up on tours, missing out and what have you, when you'd love the opportunity to play. But this white ball team has been so fantastic since 2015. It's a tough team to get into. So to get into it is probably the thing I'm more proud of.
Did you make a conscious decision to sort of concentrate on T20, or did it just sort of become apparent that was where you were heading?
I've always prioritised 4-day cricket as such. 2020 is, without sounding too arrogant about it, it's always something I've really enjoyed and I've really flourished in. I feel I have the game to compete with the guys that hit the ball as far. I don't hit the ball as far as them, but I'm able to score, in my own way at a decent pace. So I found that, keeping it simple, keeping the same things in place that I use in 4-day cricket and 50-over cricket, to just expand that slightly in 2020 cricket helps me a lot. And, if I could, I'd much rather be playing Test cricket as well, Tuffers. Just that, I played 15 tests, didn't score as many runs as I should have, especially towards the end. But, those first 11 tests or something I had, I was averaging 35 and, I actually felt like I could make a career in Test cricket. It just didn't happen. I didn't score as many runs as I should have. But, if I could get an opportunity to play Test cricket again, I'd jump at it.
So is that something that you would think about aiming for? So, this time next year, hopefully the Ashes will be going on again in Australia. Is that an aim for you? Is that a target?
Yeah, I'd love to be part of the England Test team again. Whether I'm good enough or not is a different story. Since I got dropped from Test cricket in 2018, the message was go back and play county cricket and score runs. And I felt 2019 and 2020 I've gone and put some runs on the board. So hopefully, if there are injuries or loss of form or things like that, my name will still be in the hat.
And you must feel settled in this England T20 side now, or is there always in the back of your mind, well, I suppose in everyone's back of their mind, that, a couple of bad performances, you're under the microscope again?
Yeah, I think you're always under the microscope. Look at Jason Roy. He's been so fantastic, and he's probably not scored as many runs as he'd have liked to in the last 3 games. But even he's under pressure when technically he's done so much for English cricket and played so well, and the way he plays is so fantastic. And hopefully, and I'm sure they will. They keep backing Jason, because when he comes off, he can win games of cricket by himself. But I think we all sort of look over our shoulders a bit. There's such a depth in white ball talent in England. You always know if you're 1 or 2 series away from not getting picked again if you don't perform to the standards that need to be performed at. I've tried to get away from thinking that I'm a fixed member in the team. I just rock up, and if Morgs tells me before the series you're playing all 3 games, then then even better. And if I don't, it's not really in my control.
Well, you've mentioned the subcontinent, of course, T20 World Cup next October in India. Before that, you're aiming to play in the IPL, aren't you? Because that's going to come around again at the beginning of the year. So that, if you talk about putting yourself in a shop window, that would be a good place to do it, wouldn't it?
I've put my name in this year. I've only put it in once before because as I said earlier, I've really focused on Test cricket and wanted to be part of Test cricket. So, I put my name in this year. Whether or not I get picked up, is yet to be seen. There's so many good players out there. So many good players that have been sat on the bench last year. So, as Morgs has always said, when you play in these tournaments, it's a shop window to show that you can play in different conditions, and it's also an opportunity to learn to play in those conditions.
Look, we wish you all the very best of luck for the next 9 days. What have you got immediately to look forward to on the horizon in the next few hours before it's bedtime?
Well, there's not much really. I actually thought that I'm going to get Nando's on Deliveroo, and then I'm probably going to watch. Is it Tenant? There's a movie called Tenant. I see it's on the TV at the moment as one of the movies that you can watch. So I'm probably going to settle down with that. And just wait for bedtime. Really, just count down the minutes and the hours.
Well, it's great to talk to Doug Milan in Perth this morning. Tuffers and I had a really good chat with him. And go on, Tuffers, what are you going to say?
He can't even open a window. He's certainly not looking forward to opening the window and feeling the Perth breeze come across his face before dinner. I mean, crikey, O'Reilly. But he sounds like he's getting fit, doesn't he? Even if it's just actually putting up the treadmill. You've
got to build your own treadmill first. Alistair, we talked about the Ashes and him playing there. Of course, you were part of that series as well in 2017. And he scored a century, didn't he, in Perth? He didn't just play, he actually batted pretty well. What chances of him playing this time next year?
I actually hadn't really thought about it until I listened to that clip, and you start looking at it. He's got what when I was looking, he got 140 against at Perth, didn't he? Which is a quick wicket. He's got time against the quick bowlers, which and I think didn't Ed Smith say something about his technique more suited to overseas cricket? And I was thinking about it, and actually, the one thing, just listen to that 10 minutes, is how confident he sounds now. He's joking with you. He's talking about his toilet, which I know we're laughing about, but he'll never have done that a couple of years ago in the squad. I think he really didn't think he belonged at international cricket. He kind of was like, I'm not sure I'm good enough to be here. And suddenly now what's happened in T20 cricket, and he's being the best player in the world of, that ranking, the highest it's ever been. Just listen to him talking there. I haven't spoken to him for a while, but he knows now he's one of the world's great T20 players at the moment, and he belongs to the international stage. So, actually, I can see him in that Test squad. I think, obviously, the top order, I think at the moment with Sibley, Burns, Crawley, Root, Pope and Stokes, like that top six is fairly settled. But actually, the reserves, like Dan Lawrence, is a younger option, did very well on the Australia, a very good player. And then James Bracey was also in the bubble, wasn't he, last year, the Gloucester? You'd kind of put Milan probably ahead of Bracey and alongside Lawrence if they need an experienced player. So absolutely. And I just think if he does well here in that Big Bash tournament as well, I think he will be knocking down the door to play again. And I think he would do very well because of that extra confidence he's gained.
Yeah, and also, he's 30 odd years old now, isn't he? So, as you say, you're talking about maturing, feeling more at home and sort of like understanding what's required of you. And as you say, that confidence, I think he's an absolute shoe-in for the IPL, isn't he? Cookie? Got to be, hasn't he?
Well, you'd have thought so. I mean, it's probably the hardest position to be as an overseas batsman there, because they've got so many options. The Indian play, the local Indians in their side, they've got so many of these players. They just keep appearing, don't they? These youngsters that just can hit the ball everywhere. But I think he will get picked up. I think he'll be one of those good value players as well, because I think he'll get a good deal without spending mega bucks on him. And then it's just whether he takes that opportunity, isn't he? He'll probably, if he does well like that. Those players, there's only 4 overseas, and just well in those first couple of games he could fly, because actually, as we've seen, his record is phenomenal in T20 cricket.
Consistency-wise, it just keeps churning out scores, and again, by the very nature of it, means that you are inconsistent. I think he's doing well. I think he's got every chance as well to make the Test side. If anything, I when I saw him, 3, 4, 5 years ago, I would say that was his sort of pigeonhole. I was seeing him as a Test match cricketer, but he just seems to have just said flown in the T20. But it must be very difficult not to then think to yourself, right, I'm just going to go down that path. At least he's then keeping it. He seemed very, very keen to impress, didn't he? That no, I'm still, my main goal is Test match cricket. And I think you've got to have that.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think. Sorry, Ellie, and also just go on. Just go back to him. He's obviously made a big move out of Middlesex, where he would be like a real senior player. Hey, Tuffers. But no, it's a big move as a 30-year-old player to leave your county you've been for 10, 15 years to then go to Yorkshire, which is not an easy county to go to, and from the outside, and he has scored a run. So he shows that real desire and he said he hadn't had it easy. I don't think he has had it easy. So if England do want to call upon him in Test cricket on a real tough tour, it's a really, really good option for England.
I'm expecting you to give Ed Smith a call after this programme, Cookie, because put in a word. But when you look at the schedule for next year, and we'll kind of talk about this in more detail in a second, you have got this crazy summer in this country. You've then got T20 World Cup in India, followed by the Ashes. And it would seem unlikely that you're going to get a lot of players going across the different formats, aren't you? So if you're David Malan, and if you've got the luxury of choice, which not many players have, do you try and get a World Cup winners medal with that England T20 team, who've got a great chance being number one team in the world, or do you put all your eggs in the Ashes basket?
I don't think you choose. I think he's going to be in that World Cup T20 squad. Fitness and if he stays fit, because he deserves to be. And if the Ashes, if he gets the nod, he will want to do both. I think. Like in terms of trying to plan for it as an England coach or an England state, it's impossible because fitness and clearly you're going to prioritise, aren't you? You've got those four major things which are coming up, and you'll think, right, we need the best players of eight, but you can't plan this because you just do not know when players are going to get injured or when they need a break. Like Joss Buttler against Australia said, you know what, I've won this series, I need to go home for 2 days for those two games. And he was allowed to, and it's the right call. So I think England will be very flexible, and I think England for quite a while now have got a really good group of 30 players that they could call on. I'm talking for T20 one days and Test cricket. It's good 30 players who come, so that's when your opportunity will arise. And those, you're telling David Malan you might be away a lot, you might play a lot, but you've got the opportunity. He's going to want to play in it.
Yeah, if you're an England cricketer with this schedule coming up, keep yourself fit, keep your head down, because you just do not know where you're going to be ending up, what format, whereabouts, or whatever. No. As I said, I agree with Cookie. I think it's going to be really flexible. It's going to be a nightmare. It really, well, not a nightmare because you've got the players and the depth and the strength and depth of the players to call upon, which is very, very lucky for England at the moment. But it is going to be an absolute headache.
Well, next year, we've said already, it's going to be crazily busy. Two test matches against Sri Lanka, then the Indian series, 4 test matches, and then ODIs and T20s against India as well, and then the domestic summer. Some of them will be playing in the 100 as well, we assume, assuming that all goes ahead as planned. So how do you start working out who is going to play where? So Cookie, you're saying that you would just, get as many people involved and play across formats if you can, but, people like Stokes, Archer, Buttler, Curran, who play across the formats. Are you going to get Joe Root and Owen Morgan coming to blows about who plays for whom?
No, I don't think you probably will. I think what they'll do.
I'm having him.
I think what they'll do is all the decision makers will sit in the room, won't they? And they'll say, right, you kind of almost a bit like a draft pick. You have him here and you have him there, but I think what they'll have to do is just the flexibility and take every single player on an individual thing, because you're talking about the test team. Well, actually, James Anderson, Stuart Broad are only playing Test cricket, so they're almost they don't need resting. They just need to make sure they are peaking for the Test tour. Like Dom Sibley, there's quite a few of those players who would just be Test cricket, so that will look after itself. It is the Joss Buttler, the Ben Stokes, Joe Root, as you said, and Josh. For those 4. Who just need to be managed, right? They need to be managed sensibly, and they will need to be very honest with the coaching staff. And actually, what's happened recently, I think they will, and I think things will have evolved that they can say, do you know what? I will miss this. Can I miss this series? And then people aren't going to say, "What, you don't want to play for England anymore?" They understand the need for a break, which probably a few years ago wasn't the case.
Well, you look at Ben Stokes, who said, right, okay, he played the first series, didn't he? Again, played against West Indies and started the Pakistan series, and then said, look, I need to go to New Zealand to be with my dad, which he did. Spent plenty of time there, spent time with his dad, and of course we saw sadly that Jed Stokes passed away this week, and hopefully Ben will have made the right decision to have spent that time with his dad. But it is harder, isn't it? It's hard to be a player who says, I'm going to miss out on this occasion, Tuffers.
Yeah, I mean, well, just listening to David there as well, I mean, I think it's made a hell of a lot easier than it was back in the day. I mean, Cookie just mentioned it on there, don't you want to play for England anymore? You know what I mean? And they were saying he was talking about, mentally drained. I mean, in my day, it was like, roll your sleeves up and get on with it, boy, sort of thing. You know what I mean? So I think that there are lots of these things and protocols and mental health screenings and things like that put in place now, which makes it a lot easier. And in my day, if I didn't go on tour because I had troubles at home or what have you, you know what I mean? That was it. You would have a black mark against your name, you know what I mean? He doesn't want to play for England, you know what I mean? He thinks that, home life or going back for his child's birth is more important than putting on the Three Lions. I think that has come on leaps and bounds now, and people are understanding the pressures and the schedules and what. I mean, you may as well just go to sleep in your pads, Cookie. You know what I mean? You're just going to be netting, warming up, playing, netting, warming up, playing. It just depends on what colour clothes you got on.
And some people just don't take well to being rested, do they, Cookie? No. As you discovered.
No, they don't. And also, but some players will fear like getting rested. They lose their place. I mean, I remember a story with James Anderson actually in Abu Dhabi. He was rested for the previous one-day series in England. He'd obviously been playing a lot, and actually, I think Brezzy came in, and Brezzy did really, really well. So, got to Abu Dhabi, and because Brezzy can bat, we picked Brezzy ahead of Jimmy. And I was telling Jimmy that he was like, "Well, what do you mean I'm not playing?" I said, "Well, actually." Because he was like, well, I've been rested. I was like, I know you've been rested. Actually, but Brezzy's come in and done really well, so we're going to pick him. He was absolutely steaming at me. He actually did play that game because someone got injured. I can't remember who got injured before the game, and he played, but he didn't talk to me for about a week. It's not easy, not easy captaining a bloke who's not talking to you. But that's the other.
So did this have to go through an intermediary?
Yeah. Well, we also still.
So did you have to find? Go on.
Sorry, it's not easy. We also sat next to the back of the bus. That was our seat, so we didn't talk to each other there. But yeah, I was captaining through. I was at mid-on, and I had to ask mid-off, does he want to change the field? But on a more serious note on it, it's like, actually, if you do get rested, there's only a few players really who have that guarantee to come back, because so that is obviously in the back of mind, but. As that was a few years ago, so the times have changed a little bit.
Do you think that Joe Root and Owen Morgan captain in a different way from how you captain the side?
Well, absolutely. They're different. They're different people. So I don't know how to answer. Yes, they did captain differently, I think, but then it has evolved, doesn't it? Like life, the way everything is working has evolved. But probably. In one sense, they just want the best team out pretty much most of the time, like everyone would.
Yeah. What would you have done, Cookie, with the numbers over the balcony? Would you have been able to remember them all?
No, I was saying, like, if you got it wrong and went like, and you couldn't remember the numbers, you had to have a little piece of paper. But I'll tell you what it'd be really interesting to hear what actually to talk to Owen and Nathan to actually what they were doing with those numbers. I haven't read anything about it, to be honest with you, to find out what the numbers meant. I know they're not going to tell us, but what they were actually telling Owen, because I remember he change it one and then the next ball went for 6.
Yeah, something or other.
Well, hopefully we'll find out at some stage, or it may just be quietly forgotten about. We'll never hear of it again. So once David Malan is allowed to leave his hotel in Perth, he will meet up with the Hobart Hurricanes. They played and won the opening match of the Big Bash League this morning against the defending champions Sydney Sixers, and you can hear commentary on lots of the BBL games on 5 Live Sports Extra in the morning. And Tamal Mills, part of our commentary team. Hello, Tamal.
Evening, guys.
Hiya, Tamal.
Sounds like it was a good opening match.
Yeah, it was really good. It was obviously there was a lot to talk about, a lot for us to try and get our heads around with all the new rule changes. But yeah, the Big Bash is always really good, isn't it? Over in the UK, on first thing in the morning, you can wake up and start it off with a bit of cricket. So yeah, it was good. Good to get back watching again.
Yeah, are all the crowds back, Tamal?
There were crowds, yeah. So it's starting off in across 2 hubs. So you've got a Tasmania hub played across Hobart and Launceston, and then there's also games starting tomorrow at Canberra. And then it's kind of a travelling circus kind of show as the tournament progresses. They'll move to different parts of Australia. Obviously, they're kind of leaving the spots in Australia that have been hit hardest with COVID kind of towards the back end to give them as much chance as possible of getting crowds everywhere they go. But yeah, there was a decent crowd in at Hobart today, and I'm sure there'll be a decent one at Canberra tomorrow as well.
And the Hurricanes looking strong again?
Yeah, they started really well, obviously. My old side played a couple of seasons with them.
Yeah.
Obviously, one of the only teams to have never won it, unfortunately. But yeah, they played the Sixers today. There's going to be a lot of chopping and changing with the squads. With as you guys have already mentioned, with guys like David Malan and Kemo Paul, Sandeep Lamachani. Those guys are currently doing their quarantine periods in hotels. So there's going to be a lot of guys coming in and out the squad. But yeah, both teams they performed pretty well today. To be fair, put on a good game.
So even though Tom Curran and Tom Banton both decided they didn't want to be part of it, Archer couldn't do another bubble, he said. But still 14 English players in the competition.
Oh yeah, and look, it's still a sought after competition, isn't it? They've increased the amount of overseas players from normally it's 2 per team. They've now done it to 3, but you can also have guys on the bench, so you can chop and change a little bit, and guys are doing shorter stints. I know guys like Colin Munro are only signed for the first half of the competition, so they've gone a little bit of a different tactic in terms of changing the kind of the format and the makeup of the teams. But yeah, look, guys are still really keen to get out there, and there's some guys with English interest: Dan Lawrence, Lewis Gregory, Joe Clark, guys that haven't played in the Big Bash or too many of the T20 leagues before. It's a great opportunity for them, so I'm sure they'll put on hopefully they'll put on some really good performances over the next 6 weeks or so.
And Timal, we were chatting about the new rule changes, but we sort of ran out of time. Can you explain them to me, please?
Oh God, that's the million. I don't think anybody can really explain them. So today we saw a couple of them. We didn't see the X Factor sub, so that's after 10 overs, each team can make a change for their team if they want to, but they can't take somebody out that's already had a significant impact on the game. So if they've either batted or bowled more than 1 over. But so we haven't seen that in play yet, so that was actually quite nice for us. So we didn't have to talk about it on commentary and confuse ourselves.
Sorry, mate.
But we saw so we had the power surge, which was actually really good.
Yes.
So it's now a 4-over power play at the start, and then the batting team can then choose when to take another 2-over power play, and that was actually really interesting. So Trent on Twitter, so he's kind of the big innovator, isn't he, in world cricket. He's kind of been in charge of changing the rules in the Big Bash, and then he's also been one of the main guys in coming up with the 100, which obviously we're going to play in this summer, all being well. And he put a tweet out during the game which said the average first innings score for the last 2 years in the Big Bash, when there are 2 wickets lost inside the first 4 overs, if you follow that, is 1-4-7. So today the Hobart Hurricanes, they lost both their openers, Will Jackson, Darcy Shaw, by the second over. So they'd lost 2 wickets inside the first 4 overs. Normally that team would go on to only score 147. Today, because it was only a 4-over power play, they had 2 overs later that they could use as a power play. They ended up scoring 176. So it was a good advert for his rules, because hopefully you're following all this. But
Cookie's looking slightly mystified, aren't you? He's kind of doing those kind of furrowed brows going on.
Because if you can imagine, if this in years gone by, the Hobart Hurricanes would have lost 2 wickets inside the first 2 overs, they would have gone in their shell then for the rest of the power play, and those 6 overs, the rest of those batting power play overs would have been wasted. But now, because it was only 4 overs, then the field goes out sooner, and then I think it was they chose to take their power surge surge in overs 15 and 16, I think, when Colin Ingram and Tim David were well set, and then the left arm spinner came on, and then they took the left arm spinner down, and then they got their team up to what ended up being a winning score. So that was a really good advert for the power surge early on in the tournament.
Yeah.
Tamal, can you on that power surge? Can you wait till they've decided who's bowling that over?
I was just going to say that.
No, literally, that's exactly what happened. It's so hard. So from what we understood, so basically, Colin Ingram and Tim David, they were going along nicely, rebuilding the innings, and then they said, I think it was the 15th over, left arm spinner Steve O'Keefe came on, and they decided, we're taking our batting power play, and we didn't get it confirmed, but from what we understood, the Sydney Sixers could not then change the bowler, which was otherwise I'm assuming they would, because obviously left arm spinner bowling to left-handed batter Colin Ingram with two fielders outside of the circle when he's on 50 isn't exactly a recipe you don't want to be walking into that. So it's not much fun for the bowling side, and I'd assume that a lot of teams are going to use it against spin towards kind of that mid-back end of the innings. They might even choose to use it against a team's kind of trump bowler. If you imagine Rashid Khan, normally he's bowling 4 overs, 2 for 20, isn't he? They might actually say, okay, Rashid's coming on in the 14th over, we're actually going to take the power surge, so we've got more of a chance of getting hold of him, and as a result getting a bigger total score. Yeah.
How does the bowler feel when it goes, all right, Tuffers, warm up. All right then, boys, we're having a power surge. Tuffers is coming on.
Oh, no, it's ridiculous.
Batsman rubbing your hands.
Up until that moment, Steve O'Keefe, he'd had a nice, tidy game. He was, ticking along. He was thinking, all right, I'm going to bowl my last over here. Then I'm off. I'll stand at fine leg, and I've had a good start to the tournament. And then he got hit for 4 fours in a row. So it's not much fun for the bowler, but nobody really cares about bowlers in T20 cricket, do they?
But that sounds like it's got a good chance of working, though. I like the sound of that.
Yeah, it's been well received on social media. I think I said this was a very good example of the benefits of it, because as I said, in normal games that power play would have been lost for Hobart. They'd have been scratching around, knocking it around, but they had a chance in this instance to go and get another score. Then the last one that we saw of the new rules is the I can't remember what it's called now. They've got all
the bash boost that you're talking about.
The bash boost, that's the one. Yeah, where you have to. So Hobart obviously batted first, and they were 72 for 3 from 10 overs when they were batting. So the Sydney Sixers, if they scored more than 72 runs in their 10th over, they'd get an extra point, and they did. At the halfway mark at 10 overs, they were 85 for 1, so they got a point no matter what happened in the game. They obviously didn't go on to capitalise on that start. They lost, so they walk away with 1 point, and the Hurricanes get 3.
Wow.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Tamal, you've explained it all brilliantly. Thank you so much. Tamal is going to, if you want more masterclasses in BBL obscure rules, then Tamal will be part of our commentary team on Sports Extra. Tomorrow morning's game is Melbourne Stars against Brisbane Heat. Look, at the start of the programme, we talked about the monetisation of cricket, the latest body part to get sponsored. As you can imagine, some of the responses that we got from you aren't really quite suitable for air at this time of the night, even just before the watershed. Nigel says, forearm guard. No, it's not that. Joe says the box. Nope. Thomas says, could it be a glasses cleaning cloth for Jack Leach? Very good suggestion. Matthew thinks Jofra's chain should get sponsored. But apparently what is happening is that the umpires in the BBL are going to have their armpits sponsored.
Genius.
So basically, you've got a deodorant manufacturer. When the arms go up for a 6 or for a wicket, then you get a plug for the deodorant on the actual pit. It's a world first in sponsorship, not surprisingly.
I think it's absolutely genius. You know what I mean? They'll be disappointed if it's a bit of a poor game and no one hits any sixes. But the way that T20 goes, they'll be having their arms up all the time, won't they? With the great big logo under the armpit. I mean, the mind boggles. I think it's an absolute brilliant bit of PR.
Well, I mean, Alistair is somebody who famously never sweated.
Yeah, it wouldn't be good for me.
That's not the kind of endorsement that you get.
No, I haven't had too many. I had one dog food company that looked to sponsor me once, but that kind of fell through. I mean, I don't know why or how. And yeah,
well, you've got some sheepdogs, haven't you?
Yeah, I have, but I don't know why they thought they would. Megan Tess would fancy that, but no. And then I had the only other strange one was I think Kent. Is it Kent and Kerwin? They tried to sponsor me for a bit. They did sponsor me for a bit, and then they pulled out saying, "No, we're not interested anymore. We're not going to do much sponsorship." And then suddenly David Beckham was signed 2 weeks later.
Oh, wow. Not a bad second, Cookie.
No,
not a bad second of Becks.
Wasn't even a second. I was so far away, but it did make me chuckle.
Well, what could you have next? I mean, the mind boggles, doesn't it? I mean, I wonder what they could do with the leg by. You know, perhaps because they always pat the old leg, don't they? Perhaps the old boxers could be next, couldn't they?
The inner thigh sponsorship.
I think it's an absolute masterstroke, as you say. The game of cricket is moving on, isn't it? Wow.
It absolutely is. Look, great to have you both on. We just very quickly, we've got Australia first test against India next week as well. Will Pucovski was going to be making his test debut. The Aussies' batting is looking slightly less strong than it might have done because David Warner is not necessarily fit. So we'll find out when we get to that game as well. But there'll be commentary. I think there's commentary on that on 5 Live Sports Extra. Loads of cricket coming up on 5 Live Sports Extra over the coming weeks. Thank you so much, Alistair. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for being part of the show.
Cheers,
Thanks,
nice
Ellie.
to see you, Tuffers, as well. Thank you so much to David Milan. You can read more about that interview we did with him on the BBC Sport website.
Tuffers and Vaughan's Cricket Show
on 5 Live.